I grew up in Germany with a difficult start. When I was 8, my mother remarried. My stepfather drank a lot and became violent. The government stepped in and took me from that home. They placed me in an orphanage. I was the only child there who still had a living parent. I learned very early that life can be unstable, and I carried that weight for a long time. My family was considered conservative compared to many others around us. We went to church every Sunday. I joined youth groups. I tried to be the good, believing girl. But around 14, questions started to grow in me. The Trinity confused me. 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. How could that be God? Why would God need to die on a cross? Why would he need a son? I asked for explanations and got words, but not answers that settled my heart. I felt like I was praying to something I couldn't understand, reciting words that never connected. I kept searching for meaning, but it slipped through my fingers. Years later, I worked as a model. On the outside, it looked glamorous. Inside, I felt empty. People valued me for the surface, how I looked, what size I wore, how I fit into a frame. I told myself it was fine. Money, travel, attention. Why complain? But my soul was restless. I joined a 6-month program in Egypt to work with children at a hotel. I wanted a change of scenery and maybe a change of heart. One Friday, I went with a group of tourists to a busy market. A shop owner had customers lined up. It was a good day for business. Suddenly, he closed the shop. He said he had to go to Friday prayer. I was surprised. I asked him, "Why leave now? You will lose money." He said, "It's obligatory. If I don't go, the money will not be blessed. It won't be halal." His calm certainty stayed with me. He had a reason. He had structure. He had a standard outside of himself. I realized I had nothing like that. I did what felt good or what people expected, and then I called it a choice. I am not someone who follows feelings without evidence. I need proof. I need logic. So I looked for books on Islam. I found one called Science in Islam. That book shook me. It talked about scientific facts in the Qur'an that were written over 1400 years ago and discovered by science much later. How fresh and salt water meet but don't mix. How mountains have deep foundations like pegs. How the human embryo first looks like a chewed lump. These details were presented simply, and they made me stop. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, lived in the desert, uneducated in the sciences, far from research labs. How could he include details like that? The book also said the Qur'an has been preserved in its original form since it was revealed. No additions, no rewrites, no councils deciding which chapters to keep or remove. One book, one text, one message. I had never known that. In Christianity, I saw different versions, translations, interpretations. But this was a claim of preservation, word for word. I couldn't ignore it. I decided to read the Qur'an. I treated it with a respect I didn't even fully understand. Before I touched it, I would wash and prepare for 20 minutes. I didn't know the rules then, but my heart knew to approach carefully. I opened to Al-Fatiha and read. It felt direct. It was not a story about someone else talking about God. It was guidance speaking to me. I read into the 2nd chapter, Al-Baqarah. I didn't get far before a conclusion formed inside me. This is from God. This is not human. This is not edited for taste. I wanted to say the Shahada right then. People around me warned me. Wait until you reach the part about beating women, they said. Then you'll see the ugly part. I heard that and thought, there will be context, rules, reasons, limits. Guidance cannot be built on injustice. I decided to keep reading with that trust. I wrote the Shahada on a small piece of paper. I didn't know any Arabic, and I believed I had to memorize it perfectly in Arabic, or it wouldn't count. I carried that paper everywhere. I would the words and try to form the sounds. I know now the Shahada can be said in any language, that it is the intention in the heart before anything else. But then I didn't know. I struggled for 2 weeks. I forgot words, mixed letters, felt ashamed when my tongue wouldn't cooperate. During this time, I stopped going out. After work, I went straight to my room to read and listen and learn. My colleagues noticed the change and worried. One night, they insisted I join them. "Come out," they said. "You need a break." They took me to a famous nightclub in a nearby city.
It was supposed to be the best. Lights, music, people everywhere. But my heart was not there anymore. I stood on the dance floor and felt like I was standing in another world. It was Ramadan, my first Ramadan, and my chest felt tight in a way I can't describe with any word other than full. In that moment, something entered my heart. It was like faith became physical. I can't give you a scientific term for it. I can only tell you it was real. The words of the Shahada came out of my mouth clearly, right there, over the music and the noise. I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. A colleague heard me and shouted, "What are you doing? Not here. Get out." He didn't mean go outside and say it. He meant don't say it at all. But it was already done. I left. From that night, everything changed. I wasn't chasing a feeling anymore. The feeling had found me, and it settled with proof. I had read, I had questioned, I had doubted, and I had found answers that held together. Islam didn't ask me to turn off my brain. It asked me to use it. It gave me worship that aligned with reason. It gave me prayer that organized my day. It gave me a book that claimed preservation and invited me to verify it. I moved forward piece by piece. I learned how to pray. I learned how to purify. I learned basic Arabic sounds and letters. I stumbled often. I made mistakes, but every time I learned something new, the pieces clicked into place. I decided to wear the hijab. I knew that meant closing the door on modeling, but the truth is that door had been hurting me for a long time. In that world, your value rises and falls with your measurements. If you gain weight, you lose work. If you age, you hide it. The rules are unspoken but sharp. With hijab, I felt protected from that. People would have to speak to my mind, not just my face. They would have to meet my character, not just my image. I wasn't hiding. I was choosing. I stayed in Egypt. 1 year turned into 5. 5 turned into 10. Now it's been about 20 years in Egypt and 19 years as a Muslim. I learned how to read more of the Qur'an. I learned the stories of the prophets, stories that made sense in a straight line without contradictions. I learned that mercy and justice are not opposites in Islam, they are partners. I learned that worship is not a performance on Sunday, it is structure for every day. 5 times a day, shaping the hours into a life. I also learned what faith does in private. It taught me to guard my tongue. It taught me to make amends when I'm wrong. It taught me that charity cleans wealth and softens the heart. It taught me to ask forgiveness directly from God without a middleman. It taught me that God is one without partners or children, unlike anything in his creation, near to the one who calls on him. People still sometimes ask about the hard verses. They ask about rules. They ask about roles of men and women. I tell them what I learned. Islam gives rights and duties, and it gives them with balance. It speaks to men and to women, to parents and to children, to leaders and to workers. It commands kindness and limits harm. It forbids abuse. It doesn't pretend people are perfect. It disciplines them so they can become better. When I studied the verses people warned me about, I found context, constraints, and a legal system larger than a single sentence. I didn't find a license for cruelty. I found a framework for accountability. When I compare this to my earlier life in Christianity, I remember standing with questions that never really closed. I remember trying to accept doctrines that did not match reason. I don't say this to hurt anyone's faith. I say it because the contrast is what guided me. In Islam, I found one God, one final book, one final messenger, one straight path. I found science mentioned not to replace faith, but to support reflection. I found a text preserved not to limit thought, but to anchor it. I also learned that guidance comes with tests. Not everyone understood my choices. Some people thought I was lost. Some warned me of a path they believed would take away my freedom. But I didn't lose myself. I found the core of myself. I stopped being tossed around by moods and trends. I started measuring my life by prayer, by character, by truthfulness, by modesty, by service. I think often of that night on the dance floor. It was loud, crowded, bright. But inside it was quiet. I heard the truth I had been reading for weeks, and I spoke it out loud. I didn't become perfect that night. I became responsible. I became devoted. I became someone who bows with my mind and my heart aligned. Sometimes I look back further, to the orphanage, to the fear, to the feeling of being abandoned. I used to think I had no protector. Now I know I always did. I just didn't know his names. Al-Wali, the protector. Ar-Rahman, the most merciful. Al-Hadi, the guide. I wasn't alone then, and I'm not alone now. If there is one thing I would tell the person I used to be, it's this. Keep asking for proof, but don't close the door when it arrives. Read with respect. Question with sincerity. Try the discipline before you judge it. Wash your hands, open the book, and read the first chapter out loud. Feel how it speaks. If your heart moves even a little, follow it to the next verse. That is how I found my way. I am grateful for the path that led me here, even the hard parts, because they pushed me to search. And when I searched, I found a faith that holds my mind steady and fills my heart with certainty. I found Islam. I found the words that shape my days and the prayer that guards my nights. I found a community that calls me sister for the sake of God. 19 years later, I am still learning, still repenting, still trying, still grateful. This is how I came to say there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. This is how I stayed, and this is how I live now, by the book that reached me across centuries and spoke to me as if it were written today.